Welcome to the Pharma Voice Editor's Take video series, filmed live at the 2012 DIA Annual Meeting in Philadelphia. Hosted by Taryn Grome, editor of Pharma Voice. In this session, Taryn meets with Glen Vries, president, Medidata Solutions Worldwide.
Glen, welcome to the 2012 DIA Annual Conference Editor's Take video program.
Thank you. It is always a pleasure to speak with Pharma Voice.
Excellent. Now, tell us how Medidata is continuing to tackle more challenges across the clinical development process from concept to conclusion, or as we like to say, from molecule to market.
I think we're going through a really interesting time if you look at clinical development overall. We spent a lot of time with the clinical trial teams, people who are responsible for just executing on one study, but actually over the last couple of years, we've been spending more and more of our time talking to higher and higher level executives, all the way up to the CEOs of companies who are trying to figure out how they can be the most competitive life sciences companies of the future. People are realizing that there are going to be winners in life sciences and there are going to be losers, and the winners are going to be the companies that figure out how to do things differently to the point of being more effective, more efficient, and just better at getting new products into the hands of patients who need them. And so that is why we're spending all our time really working on what we see as a transformational set of technologies that's the Medidata Clinical Cloud. How do we help these sponsors who really want to do the best job they can getting products to patients get there?
So let's talk about how the industry is going to be impacted by the clinical cloud.
So I think the clinical cloud is an interesting term. Cloud can be somewhat of a dangerous term. People can use it to mean different things. People use the word clinical to define different spans of what you think about from all the way from concept to conclusion. I think the clinical cloud from Medidata's perspective is a set of infrastructure that people can use to do processes differently than they have in the past. If my hypothesis is that the life sciences company that's successful of the future is going to work more efficiently and work more effectively than they are now, then the clinical cloud needs to support all the constituents, all the study stakeholders, the executives making decisions, the monitors out in the field, the data managers responsible for quality, the doctors and nurses at sites, the patients themselves. It needs to support them so they will have a better experience. They would be more effective than they would be without the same kind of infrastructure we can provide. And that's really what we see our impact being.
So all of this has to translate into some kind of data, and let's talk about how analytics are now going to help sponsors transform their trials and what role analytics do play.
So I think analytics themselves are really interesting, but before we even talk about analytics, we have to talk about where the data is coming from that goes into that analytics. I think that you see a lot of people in our industry still running clinical trial systems, getting certain pieces of data out of them that they're used to getting out of them, but ignoring a lot of data value that is sitting inside those systems still. And I'll give you a very clear example. When you're running a clinical trial from a data management monitoring perspective, usually your job is to get a locked clinical database. Here's all the vital signs and tumor volumes that you had recorded for your subjects. There's a huge amount of audit trail information. There were a huge number of transactions that went into getting to that locked database. And one of the things that we're trying to do in the clinical cloud is unlock that value. Without our customers having to manipulate or transform or manage all of that operational information, we're putting together dashboards, we're putting together decision-making capabilities for them that they can just consume as part of their daily job. That's an example of how the monitor, who's got the benefit of working on the Medidata Clinical Cloud, is going to do a better job of figuring out which sites they need to pay more attention to than that same monitor would without the Clinical Cloud. So we're waking up the value of that data, and then the analytics actually are what we use to create the reports, et cetera.
How does this play off of the RAVE system, and does it combine, or is this just the next evolution?
Okay, so when you think about the Medidata Clinical Cloud and how that relates to Medidata individual products like RAVE or Designer or Balance, really what we're talking about is the amalgamation of all the transactions across them. So the Medidata Clinical Cloud is about managing your clinical data transactions. It's about managing your financial transactions in products like Grants Manager and Grants Manager Contracting. And it's about managing your milestone transactions. This DIA is about a year after we made an acquisition of a CTMS company. And one of the announcements that we've made is the complete integration of data that you would think of as EDC data, Rave data in Medidata world, with some of the functionality in CTMS, where all of that data flow happens automatically for the end user. Again, we're making that end user more efficient. We're exposing that information and reports that much earlier, and we're putting the person who's probably in charge of some of our end users in a position to make better decisions about resource allocation.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the next level of innovation that's coming out of Medidata.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Great.
Additional Editors Take videos, as well as podcasts, white papers, webinars, and more, are available in the resources area at www.pharmavoice.com.